perspective to identify what is it that customer really wants. The topic of the discussion is rapid technological advances shaping voice branding is indispensability. We're going to talk about creating a custom brand voice, setting expectations and requirements, speech data ownership, personalization, customization, and a whole range of other topics. Our presenter for the next session is Phoebe Ohayon, who is the voice identity designer, conversational audio designer, voice for sonic branding strategies at VoiceBranding. Phoebe, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. So my name is Phoebe Ohayon. I'm head of design and co-founder of VoiceBranding. And I'm going to talk today about how rapid technological advances shape voice branding indispensability. And I will elaborate this in 4 parts. So first, I will give you an introduction about voice branding. And second, I will talk about voice branding indispensability. And in other words, its power. And as the third topic, I will talk about the influence of rapid technological advances and why they shape voice branding indispensability. And finally, I will talk about what this all results in, how it comes together. So before I do that, I want to start by offering you a free hack. And all it requires of you is the following. Focus on the sound of my voice for a few minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to do a little audit of the brand or company you work for and how it represents itself through a voice. So what are teams doing within your company when choosing a voice to represent the brand? What is the process and strategy behind it? And just to be clear, this can be about choosing a voice for a commercial, product integration, a voice bot, an IVR system, etc. So chances are that you're thinking of that you sort of randomly choosing a voice, or perhaps an agency you work with might suggest a couple of voices by playing some showreels or auditions to choose from, and the team simply sits down and listens and picks. And sometimes a shortcut is taken and a voice is selected or chosen because you have used it before. So I want you to pay attention to this process and what is this process like within your company that you work for based on your experiences. We're going to come back to this at the end of the talk, and I'm hoping that you will learn how to tweak this process a little bit, and that it could significantly change the way the brand is perceived. So as you might have guessed by my company's name as well, I'm particularly interested in voice branding and how brands exploit the power of voice branding. And let me explain a bit more. I'm interested in the fact that a lot of designers, marketeers, and brand strategists know exactly what their brand should look like. It's described in detail in most of the brand documentation guidelines. But when it comes to sound, there are often many question marks, especially when it comes to how to speak and how to talk. And in my opinion, this is kind of ironic because when it comes to voice, we're all experts. And I think you know what I mean because you have listened all to my voice now for a few minutes. And you probably have made some assumptions about who I am. So think about my age, my gender, and my background, perhaps emotional status, and also perhaps the personality, and perhaps even my competence about the subject of this talk. And based on this information, you form an impression of me. And trust me, and it's not about what I say, it's about really how I speak. So despite the fact that we're all very sensitive to these kinds of signals and make decisions in our daily lives based on this, up until this point, most designers, marketeers, and brand strategists still find it very hard to devise a voice branding strategy to manage their brand identity through the act of speaking. But why is this difficult? There's actually a simple explanation. Although we're all auditory experts, we do not consciously process all the information we get from auditory signals. And this makes it more complex to understand and therefore find the relevant connections based on which we can make knowledgeable design decisions that can identify an authentic voice brand. And I want to change this because voice branding is indispensable no matter the touch point. So how indispensable is it? Because it enables you to exploit the power of voice and the act of speaking itself. And this power is significant. First of all, I want to believe, and I have a lot of reason to believe, that a valid strategy is needed to become and maintain a brand that provides reliable and great user experiences. This is because your voice brand and the act of speaking itself shapes the brand perception of your users. Based on this perception, they form an opinion about your brand, product, and services, which defines the relationship. Scientists have spent a lot of time researching the effects of our voice and different speaking styles. And we make sweeping assumptions and judgments when hearing someone talk, and those impressions can predict meaningful user experience outcomes. For example, what we like and trust, and this can determine convenience and preference. If no disconnection occurs in brand perception, both from a brand and a user perspective, users are more likely to identify themselves with your brand if they are aligned with it. The relationship grows. You are earning that top of mind status. You earn their preference. It's part of the explanation of why people choose one product or service over another, regardless of pricing. Now, we must not forget, though, especially me as an audio geek, the brand perception and the UX functionality is not just influenced by sound. The visual identity matters, and of course also your copywriting and the dialogue design, especially if we think about conversational. But these are aspects that we don't really forget about. The aspects that we often forgetting about is sound, and we should actually not do that. Because also when we sense a disconnect between what we hear and what we expect, and let's be honest, this still often occurs in a voice experience, your voice brand is essential. And I will elaborate this more with the 7-38-55 rule. And I would argue that the word rule is a bit, we have to take that bit with a grain of salt, but that's a different talk. So the rule is made by the famous professor Albert Mehrabian. I hope I pronounced his name right. So he combined statistical data and represented the concept concerning the communication of emotions. So the rule states that 7% of meaning is communicated through spoken word, 38% through the tone of voice, and 58% through body language. Now, this rule is often misunderstood and misinterpreted and misused because the researchers that researched this rule was focused on saying one thing and expressing something different with facial expressions, tone, or posture. And what do people believe then? However, the findings are still interesting because when users hear a disconnect in the sound of your voice and how you speak versus to what you are actually saying, it can drastically negatively affect the user experience. Then users are more likely to extract meaning from your message through the sound of your voice and how you speak, instead of extracting the meaning from the actual words you say. From my perspective, this will put your written dialogue design efforts to the maximum value, if you have that correct. So in summary, voice branding is indispensable to make sure that you're being perceived as desired, which is essential to avoid signaling a disconnect, which leads to off-brand interpretations. and often negative influence on the user experience. To be more specific, I'm talking about rapid technological advances in automated speech. And this is a bit of the reason why technological advances are really shaping the indispensability of voice branding. And when I'm talking about the technological advances, I'm talking about ASR, automatic speech recognition, natural language processing, and speech synthesis. And to explain this part, let's focus on the turn-taking principle of a conversational experience. It's built around the user input, and this is what triggers the response. So the system output starts with the what, like the copywriting, the dialogue design, and this converts it into speech. And let's call this vocalization. And finally, the combination is received by the user, and let's call this user interpretation. So rapid technological advances like speech synthesis, ASR, and NLP are improving, or in this case, ASR and NLP are improving the accuracy and value of the first part of the interactive conversation design, the what, the copywriting, and the dialogue design. Without understanding what your user is saying, it doesn't matter if what you're writing back, or you cannot create a pop response. So, but if you only focus on the what and not think about the how, the vocalization, it becomes a bit meaningless in that sense. You can have a beautifully written dialogue design, but if the vocalization is off, you don't get the maximum value out of your written dialogue design efforts. This means that you're not capitalizing on the opportunity to make your conversational products and services. In fact, I think if we go back to that rule, to the graph that we just saw, we see people sense a disconnect between what they hear and what has been said in spoken words. They focus on the tone of the voice instead of the actual words to make an understanding of the signals they perceive. And based on this, users form an opinion about your brand and about the experience of your product and services. Even if you're using just a standard Amazon Polly or Google Voice, pay some attention to the vocalization of your written materials, adjust it with SSML to improve that vocalization. And a step further would not be that it just aligns with the vocalization on a functional level, but it would be an on-brand message. Creating an on-brand vocalization in the voice experience requires evocative management and emotional performance of the voice. This connects to how users determine the meaning of the product and service, and how that relates to what they want and need. You want to make sure that you're signaling your brand identity as well as functional and emotional context-related values defined by the user needs. It might require custom solutions to make sure nobody else is using the voice that is supposed to represent your brand. This empowers you to differentiate, to be unique and more authentic. But now you might think, okay, it's clear now. We need to signal our brand identity, but how does it work? Well, functional and emotional contact-related values defined by the user needs are very important to define the speaking styles that can resonate the brand identity in specific context. So let me give you an example. So think about a sport brand. The core brand values instruct us to come across as sporty and loyal. To come across as sporty and loyal during a sport quiz, we might want to speak with a lot of intensity and a bit faster than average. And we also want to raise the pitch of our voice. So think about this example as speaking style A. Now, at the end of the game, we want to share some disappointment. One of the user lost the game, so obviously we want to continue using the speaking style A, or we won't continue using speaking style A because it becomes a bit distant and maybe a bit aggressive. Instead, we want to lower the intensity of our voice and speak relatively slower than average. And then we create a speaking style B that expresses empathy. So both speaking styles are completely different, but within the context, they're on brand because they make sure we're being perceived as sporty and loyal. And here we have no disconnect. Okay, so now we've talked about voice branding indispensability in general and why and how rapid technological advances shape voice branding indispensability. Now let's talk about how this all comes together. And to give you an idea about what I mean by this is the following. We currently see that companies are starting to ask more questions. Questions like, what does the brand sound like? How do we communicate through voice and speech? Which voice fits the brand and suits the user experience its best? And what is the best approach to create a synthetic custom voice based on our requirements? And I think the last question is a very relevant question to many companies who are investing in their conversational products and services, and also synthetic media, another branch in the AI field. Because designing custom TTS brand voice is the most on-brand solution that manages vocalization for conversational products and services. And for the last part of this talk, I would like to focus more on some important facets of the process of designing a custom TTS brand voice. So first of all, a custom TTS brand voice is the best solution to grow, evolve, and adapt with your company's conversational roadmap, especially when companies are operating in multiple languages. In the long term, it becomes a cost-effective way to communicate to your users at every conversational touchpoint and even some digital touchpoints as well. And to get a head start for a strong design approach, value the following in your design process: responsibility and control, data-driven design decisions and knowledgeable design, and ownership and flexibility. Let's go over them one by one. So responsibility and control is all about having a duty to deal with something, to control something. To great brands, it's their duty to manage how they communicate authentically. This allows them to differentiate and to express a unique, exclusive identity that raises brand awareness and builds stronger relationship. Before starting to develop a custom TTS brand voice, you need to set expectations and requirements. Although technical requirements are also a key player here, you need to also set expectations and requirements in terms of of how you want your custom voice to be vocalized. What kind of speaking styles are involved? Are there speaking styles involved? Is that on brand in the context that you operate in? These specific requirements and expectations define what separates on-brand design from off-brand design. It provides direction based on which you can measure performance. It allows you to control your design and improve if necessary. So define what it means to be perceived as desired, research functional and emotional user needs, and determine what validates use cases and define the limitations and context-related requirements. So the second one, data-driven design decisions and knowledgeable design. Base your design and the voice that you choose on how you speak. Base it not just on some ideas, but on results. Be that company or designer that is able to tell you exactly why you've designed a male, female, or gender-neutral voice, for example. To make knowledgeable design decisions, you need data, because in my opinion, knowledge defines itself by the relevant connections and trends you find in data. The more accurate and relevant the data, the better your knowledge is, and the better your decisions are backed. If you don't think about this, you're blind, and you will simply have no idea on how users are making assumptions and perceive your brand through vocalization and through the TTS solution you've invested in. This approach also is extremely valuable to make decisions about customization and personalization for different users. the better knowledge you have on how your custom voice is vocalized, the better knowledge or the better you know what needs to be changed to personalize or customize it for different users. Ownership and flexibility. Designing and developing a custom TTS voice is a long-term strategic investment. It enables you to build an authentic on-brand solution that gives you ownership and flexibility on how you want to communicate. But let's dive deeper into the ownership of speech data that is involved in creating a custom TTS voice. Creating a custom TTS voice involves speech data to train your voice and how to vocalize the voice that you've chosen. But who's responsible for that data? Who is the owner of that data? These answers can become quite complex, and you need to take into account to spend time in the process on setting up agreements between voice actors, TTS vendors, or agents or unions that are involved. You'll need to take time to tune out the details and take this into your process and take time for negotiations and setting up agreements. Because when you don't invest what you've owned or invested in, of what you created, you're not really in control. So own your investment and embrace ownership to get more flexibility in the long run. So this brings me back to the beginning of my talk, where I asked you to do a little audit of your company and to also focus on the sound of my voice. And I hope it becomes a bit clear of what I mean by the indispensability of audio, of voice branding. And I hope it inspired you to adjust a bit your process, perhaps, and learn something that can optimize your process of choosing a voice and thinking about vocalizing your brand communication. Yeah, this is the end of my talk. I hope I didn't spend too much time on things you already perhaps knew. But yeah, I want to thank you and give the opportunity to ask some questions. And please do reach out if you want to approach me after the conference to continue the conversation or have any other questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phoebe, for being a part of our summit once again. In fact, just so that our viewers know, Phoebe was with us for the Voice Tech Summit India as well, just a couple of months back. And Phoebe is with us this time as well for the Voice Summit Middle East. All right. Phoebe, are you with us still? Are you online?
Yeah, I'm online.
So, first of all, thank you very much for sharing with us your knowledge and experience with regards to voice branding. Specifically from a Middle East point of view, have you ever been to the Middle East? And do you think that there is any difference in approach where if you're trying to reach out to, let's say, a Middle Eastern audience, we don't want to be stereotypical over here, but do you have any insights for any organizations that are operating within the Middle East that the approach has to be different, or the whole process has to be different when trying to create a brand because the demography has got a different sort of appeal or appeals in a different way?
Yeah, I think you already mentioned the answer in your question, because I think wherever you go, the cultural differences are really important to take into account into the process. And especially, I think it's really important, especially with languages that are related to like the base, some of the base of the family, like the roots. You can find some strategic plans in how to implement or roll out certain conversational experiences with different accents or dialects or different languages more easily when languages overlap more a bit.
Have you worked with any Middle Eastern companies or companies based in this region?
No, not yet. I've been to Israel a lot, but not like the whole Middle East. And I've been to Doha at the airport, but that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Phoebe. And if any of our viewers would like to interact with Phoebe or any of the other speakers, then they're all available at the backstage in the VIP booth, as well as the reception area. But until then, Phoebe, once again, thank you very much for being a part of the Voice Tech Summit Middle East, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you so much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to slip into a short networking break, and once we're back, we're going to dive straight into the panel discussion on building a digital assistant or chat box. What works and what doesn't when you're looking at building a chat box. All of this and more in the next 5 minutes or so. See you in about 5 to 10 minutes.